Now, if we operate on the result of an inner join, then what happens? Well, we can combine the customer and transact using the inner join. We have seen how inner join works beautifully in such situations where you have customer transactions, right? It may be members and events, e-commerce user and purchasers, right? So a lot, or purchase and payments, multiple attempts of the payments, or installments per payment. One installment broken into 12 monthly installments. So you have, so in such situations, inner join is the most appropriate way to express the relationship. Recombine them based on inner join on the ID primary key equals to foreign key customer ID. Then we perform a group by on this inner joined expanded table. So now we have the amount available and we will sum the amount, right? We'll sum the amount based on the group by boundaries. Yeah. And the group by is by customer ID because we definitely have access to customer ID. And then what happens is we will then be able to select customer name, yeah, comma, the total amount renamed as SX because that's the question. Give me a list of total expenditure by each customer to date. Yeah, okay. And let me see, a customer group by customer ID. Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, good. Okay, let's try this out in our SQL Lite Studio. Okay, so um, we do this. We perform select everything from transact. Okay, let's do this, and we see that we have the entire transact table. We can say select everything from transact group by ID. Okay, here we basically ask group by to group each unique value of ID. That is primary key, right? Primary key is always unique. So each row becomes its own group and then select everything. So this is not interesting. What if we say group by customer ID? Then we'll have everything from transact group by customer ID. Now, one thing that is kind of interesting thing is internally, SQL has performed a group and you just say select everything. There's no aggregation function given. Then what happens? Well, we get this strange number called amount and all this, right? What if we say select this average? We would like to select average of amount, right? From transact group by customer ID. So what happens? And we see that actually, oh, sorry, I accidentally sorted it. Well, let's just run it again. So we see that if you don't specify anything, what's happening is that the amount is showing some information that is really very strange. We see that the average is this amount. The amount given here that doesn't really have an aggregate function is not really what we want. And if we change this to sum, obviously it is not going to be agreeable with the amount here. Yeah, so we see totally very different values. So it is always good to make sure that you specify an aggregation function and not leave it to default values, which means you either read up the documentation or you specify yourself. So I would choose to be very clear in my SQL statement here that I want sum, all right, and not some random values or random aggregation function, and then group by. So when we do this, it is so far so good, but we need to remove the bracket. So the way to do that is Okay, so sum amount as SX, group by customer ID, like this. So if we run again, finally we have group by customer ID, so this will be unique. The amount here is not really needed, so maybe we shouldn't do that. It is confusing and dangerous. So we just want to see 3 columns. And the description is not meaningful because the description different, there will be different descriptions over the rows in each group by customer ID. And so which description do you show? And so we would rather not show. Okay, so we managed to produce this, which is of course slightly different from our slide, but uh, it illustrates the point that we actually don't want to see values that may not make sense after the group by. What happens next? Well, as we said, here it doesn't fully answer the full question, the full business question. We asked who, give me the names. So one way is we can select this first, okay, and then using the customer ID to kind of cross into the customer table where ID equals to 1, where ID equals to 2, and retrieve the name and addresses. So if you are thinking like that, you would be better off just creating an inner join. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. So we'll select customer, we'll select transact inner join with customer on customer ID equal to transact dot customer ID. So the group by is going to be operating on the result of transact cross join with inner join with customer on the alignment of these 2 columns. Yeah, so the group by kind of takes a lower precedence, inner join first to create this bigger table, then we group by that. Then what else do? We select customer, but at this point we have access to not just customer ID, but we also have access to customer name. So we can say customer dot name to give us the names of those expenditures. So when we run, it will look like this. Yeah, because of rounding error, we get a 00 stray value here, but it is correct. Okay, now you notice I put customer.name, okay, and it appears as name. In certain cases, whatever you type here will appear as the outcome. So it might come out as customer.name. Then if you don't like it or your transact table also has a name, then you want to be clear and you can always change it to customer name like this. So the S is very powerful and useful. I mean, it's not just a pretty interface to make the name look better, shorter, more presentable, but such as in cases such as sum bracket amount, it's impossible to access that column if you're unable to rename it. Okay, so that completes our illustration for using group by to perform aggregation function and in conjunction with aggregation functions such as sum, average, min, max, and also in conjunction with the inner joined enlarged table where it makes business sense to have the customer IDs aligned with transaction IDs, transactions customer IDs, and then we can perform interesting queries based on the outcome. So definitely use group by. Means safe to even say that if your application doesn't eventually use any group by, perhaps it may not be that attractive, it may not be that useful, it may not be that interesting. So definitely think about how your application can be enhanced by search queries, by convenience checks, by a quick reference button, to perform group by on behalf of the customer. Okay, see you in the next video.